The Toronto Foundation President and CEO will speak, and then she will be joined in conversation with Sarah Fulford, editor of Toronto Life magazine, and philanthropist Claire Dubach. They will then discuss how to put vital signs into action. I'd now like to direct your attention to the screens at the front of the room. Sharon Avery, congratulations on your new position and welcome. The Canadian Club of Toronto's podium is yours.
Thank you, Fred, for that generous and welcoming introduction. Thank you all for coming here today. It really is a 30-day test. You tell me how I do. Thanks also to everyone at the Canadian Club for offering your podium to the Toronto Foundation for the past 4 years so that the vital work of Vital Signs can reach such an influential audience of city builders. Thank you especially for letting us share a sneak preview of our brand new animated video. I have to give a shout out to our friends at Ben Simon Byrne, who masterminded that spot for us pro bono, as well as the campaign that we will push out with it later this fall. What we love about this video is that it ties together all of our work and puts Vital Signs Report in the context of that mission. This week marks the launch of the 15th Vital Signs Report. It was first created here in Toronto in 2001 and is now produced in 80 countries around the world. So if you're looking for an example of Canadians exporting expertise globally, here it is. Vital Signs is compiled from over 100 sources and is easily the most comprehensive measure of the quality of life in our city. Now, I've been on this job for 30 days, so I feel a little like a new principal delivering report cards she had no hand in creating. But for the next 15 minutes, I'm going to give you some context for all that data and then discuss it with some pretty interested stakeholders. This year, there are two big changes to our reporting. One, because our data has grown so deep and rich, we've decided to summarize it in 3 broad categories: trends, shifts, and our global standing. And 2, we're directly connecting the data to its implications for you. We're asking, are you optimistic about Toronto? Yes, vital signs is a snapshot taken in a moment of time, but it needs to be a call to action. At the end of the day, vital signs is just data. It becomes a tool to move our city if it shines a glaring light on the fact that quality of life is a relative term. It all depends on who you are and where you live. In other words, our vaunted quality of life is not equitable. It's becoming less so every day. We have the tools to restore that equity. Let's use vital signs to give ourselves the will to do that vital thing. So let's dive in. I'll start with the trends over several years. If 2001 feels like centuries ago, for most of us it is. Back then, when we released the first vital signs report, the average price of a home was $274,000. The proportion of seniors living in the region has grown since then by 27%. And the obesity rate was, well, it's risen by over 32% for adults in a decade. And for young people, obesity has become a fact of life for more than a quarter. But the really bad news concerns our youngest people. The sad and intractable fact is that for the past 20 years, the child poverty rate has basically not changed one bit. Back in 1996, nearly 1 in 4 Toronto children was brought up in poverty. And today, in the richest city in Canada and one of the 6 richest urban areas in the world, 1 in 4 children is still brought up in poverty. This is unacceptable. It's frankly intolerable, and I am determined to use vital signs to change that trend. This will be especially hard for the 64,000 Torontonians for whom poverty is a daily reality. In fact, 5 of the 15 poorest ridings in the country are in our city. The trends out of vital signs aren't all negative. We are one of the most livable and laudable cities on earth, but it's the irony of having world-caliber child poverty and world-caliber prosperity living side by side that deserves our frustration, our anger, and our action. On the other hand, we've made enormous progress on big issues since the early days of vital signs. Greenhouse gas emissions have fallen 24% since 1990. High school graduation rates are at an all-time high. Crime is down, voter apathy is down, employment is up, at least to pre-2008 levels. The number of us who take transit, walk, or bike to work is steadily rising. Those are just some trends, for better or for ill, that Vital Signs has tracked. Now I want to turn to some significant shifts or changes in direction. Unemployment among our young people is still high, but from 2014 to 2015, youth unemployment dropped significantly. And at the same time, Toronto ranked first among 35 global cities for opportunities for youth. Could we be doing something right here? Or is this just a blip that future reports will see corrected? The second big shift is the first cousin of poverty, food banks. Over the past 15 years, there's been a steady rise in food bank use, certainly in downtown neighborhoods. But the use of food banks has moved from the downtown core, where many of us here live and work, to the inner suburbs. In those neighborhoods, food bank use is up by nearly 50% since 2008. This disturbing level of suffering may be out of sight for many of us, but I'm going to ensure that it doesn't remain out of mind. The third major shift identified in Vital Signs involves another chronic problem: affordable housing. We flagged this as a growing issue in 2001, and it continues to plague us. 18% fewer people found their way into public housing last year than in the previous year. This despite the relentless growth of applicants for affordable homes. Many units are also in need of repair. It begs a big question. Why do we think of public housing as solely a public sector responsibility? Why can't private money, especially private philanthropy, be part of the solution? Now let me turn to our third set of findings from Vital Signs, our global standing. We're highlighting this for two reasons. First, we have more global data than ever before. And second, Toronto is not only finding itself on some pretty heady global podiums, we're owning them. Toronto ranked as the best place to live among 50 global cities this year. What stands out in this and other rankings is not only our livability, but the quality of our education. When 60% of your citizens have a post-secondary education, you're a player in the knowledge economy. Again, not all our global rankings are worthy of medals. Our homelessness rate is 14% higher than Amsterdam's and 30% higher than London's. But the real take-home from these global standings is that we'll never have to use the phrase world-class again, because we are so clearly among the world's top cities. So, trends, shifts, and our global standing. Those are three perspectives on some of the most important issues uncovered this year by this year's Vital Signs. But no matter how you look at the report, from my three views to the 10 areas of focus to what your own instincts tell you, the issue of social inequity, our most vulnerable who are being left behind, always rises to the top. But where do we go from here? How do we use all this deep data, especially to tackle such a complex and diffuse problem as equity? We know the costs of rising inequity. We just need to look south. But how do we shrink it? One answer lies in the video that preceded my remarks. One person did one small good thing that grew into a big good thing. This doesn't always happen, but that just means we have to try harder. And by we, I mean all of us in this room. Of course, we can also act on a much bigger level than one person doing one thing. We're living at a time of extraordinary opportunity for our governments to work together. For the first time in years, all three levels of government are not only talking to each other, but working with each other. All three governments are turning their gaze to the big, costly, long-term issues. This is a sweet time in national, provincial, and civic politics. So it's crucial that we all move now and quickly because we have this rare alignment. Here are two examples. On Tuesday, the Toronto Regional Board of Trade released its annual report on jobs. It spoke about huge job opportunity and creation in the city. All those transit jobs going out of the commitment to spend billions on infrastructure in the GTA. The lesson for us is that employment doesn't always rise and fall by distant forces. Now you can plan for it. You can align your training programs, your immigration programs, your hiring programs to make the most of this opportunity. Second example. Last week, I was invited to Mayor John Tory's first roundtable on philanthropy, with the objective of exploring new models and new ways of thinking of city building and inspiring city building philanthropy. We discussed the issues of housing, public spaces, and poverty, and how we find ourselves at a moment in time where collaboration is the rule, not the exception. So things are starting to move. But how do we move? I believe one of the key answers is to invite private philanthropy into the equation. The kind of city-building philanthropy that Toronto Foundation is an expert at aligning and convening. At the base of this philanthropy is Vital Signs. It's more than a measure of our success of the city. It's more than a map of where our civic fabric is starting to fray. It's a bridge that brings city builders and city-building philanthropy to the same place on issues so that we can tackle those issues together. Because Vital Signs is an annual checkup, it lets us see what isn't working and what is, so that we can build from a place of strength. In the months to come, we'll also be using Vital Signs to launch a shared strategy to build equity and resilience in Toronto. We believe these are two defining opportunities for all of us over the next 15 years. Our mandate is completely aligned with many of what people call the new philanthropy. Today, civic philanthropy in Toronto has changed beyond recognition. Many more families, by no means all of them wealthy, see the power of giving back and are choosing to act. They understand that old problems succumb less and less to old solutions. They're more engaged with the act of giving. They often decide as a family, not just as head of the family. They do more than write a check. With the explosion of charitable causes, they've become more sophisticated, more insistent, and far more data-driven. They want their money to have impact they can measure and direct it to solving urgent problems in bold and creative ways. Within this new reality, Toronto Foundation is playing a growing role as convener and collaborator. More and more, we're the inciting partner in bringing together other funders from all three sectors, and especially our own fund holders, to create new ways of investing collectively. That process is never perfect. We're often trying things no one else has, but we have the power to convene those conversations and from there to spark new collaborations. We're working to attract more and more city-building philanthropists to our table. We're going to invite them, as I invite you, to take part in the kind of city building that Toronto needs now, taking data-driven decisions, understanding where the biggest vulnerabilities are, convening partners, and funding the programs that have the best chance of working. Vital Signs is our gift to the city and its citizens. It is open source, both in input and sharing. We have no axe to grind, no self-interest to protect. As our community's foundation, we are a neutral agent ideally suited to bringing philanthropy to the crucial task of creating a better city. Later this month, we will publish a new companion to Toronto's Vital Signs, our first implications report for philanthropists. We hope it will connect the dots between the insights held in Vital Signs and the action needed for change. Right now, we're going to have our own mini forum on how Toronto can remain vital and highly livable. I'm going to share the podium with Toronto Life editor Sarah Fulford, no mean city builder herself, and Claire Duboc, veteran board member and one of our foundation's most creative fund holders. But before I ask them to join me on stage, I want to leave you with one thought. Charles Darwin never said that only the strongest and smartest survive. What he said was, only the most adaptable survive. The more you connect with others, the more adaptable, the more resilient it's possible to be. No one is more committed to finding and forging those points of connection than we are. After all, the future of one of the world's great cities is at stake. It's up to us to create that future together. Thank you.
Wow, that was so inspiring. Thank you, Sharon.
Well done.
This will be very informal and very brief because I know you all have somewhere important to be after this. But I wanted to drill down on a couple of things you raised. You spoke about the Toronto Foundation as being a convener. What does that mean exactly?
Well, I think that it's been very interesting my first few weeks on the job, and I get asked a lot of what the Toronto Foundation is. Mm-hmm. In fact, after having worked at Sick Kids and UNICEF, my dad had said to me, what is the Toronto Foundation? And what is fascinating about it and what has just been joyous for me and one of the reasons I wanted to join is it's truly this neutral agent in philanthropy. So our goal is to inspire philanthropy of all kinds, and our mandate is to invest in city building. So we have no commitment to any one thing except the thing that we put the stake in the sand about. And I think that you're starting to hear I have some passionate opinions about what that might be.
And Claire, you're not new to the foundation. You're a fund holder and an evangelist. Why, from the point of view for the foundation, why does it matter so much to you? Why do you use it? Why do you participate in it?
Evangelist, powerful word. Maybe I would describe myself as more of an advocate for the Toronto Foundation. And really coming from our experience, my family's experience, my husband Sam and I over there, we are like many people in this audience. We were brought up to give back. And over the years, as we grew, the way that we gave back evolved, that time, talent, and treasure. And at some point, about 10 years ago, we decided that we were in a place where we wanted to commit to the long term and make our philanthropy something that we would set in stone, and started to discuss the idea of putting together a foundation. And when we looked at options, Toronto Foundation was something that was introduced to us. Initially, the big solve was to how do we make it easier? And Toronto Foundation was a great way to do that, because they would put a fund together for us and do the administration of it. But I think the other two parts of it that were really important was the idea of having a community of people that we would also have access to.
Right.
So other fund holders and all the things that we got out of that, and also the context. Right. So to wrap some more thought and information around what we were doing individually. And Vital Signs is an example of that, as well as a lot of the other things that we get access to throughout the year.
So in Sharon's talk, she talked about the new Philanthropist. I think we have Exhibit A here. Who is the new Philanthropist, and what does that look like, and what is the Toronto Foundation, how does the Toronto Foundation engage with the philanthropist of today?
Well, I think today there is a point in time in philanthropy where you committed to an organization, and that still happens a lot, and it's a wonderful thing. But I think what we offer is the chance to actually connect with an issue and actually attack it from a variety of angles. So I think that the new philanthropist wants to engage in their philanthropy. I think a lot of them want to learn. The issue, when we talk, it's been fascinating for me to get into the topic of poverty reduction and equity. We talk a lot about the gap between rich and poor. Well, even that conversation makes the rich feel guilty. And the fact is that what we're not saying is you should be poorer. We're saying we need the poor to come up into the middle class to make the whole community richer. And I think what excites me about the philanthropists I've already encountered at Toronto Foundation on our board is that they have a real, in their core, a sense of equality and making things available to everybody. And you can do that when you're tackling themes and issues and not just single organizations.
You spoke also about, you mentioned Mayor Tory and partnerships with the city on projects that we traditionally think of as municipal business. So, for example, building a park under the Gardiner or a maze on Center Island. These are projects inspired by, funded by philanthropists, but they're municipal projects. Are we going to see, maybe even if taxes are raised, there's still going to be a greater need for funds? Are we going to see more and more of these types of partnerships?
Well, I think that one of the interesting things, I was at a forum yesterday and they had an economist talk about the global economy. And the fact is that since 2008, you're just not seeing a lot of growth anywhere. It's all very slow, and certainly not at the government level. And so my question is, the longer we leave some of these intractable problems, the longer it's going to take to pull ourselves out of them. And my simple question is, where could philanthropy play a role? If we actually invited some of our philanthropy that's happening very generously in the city into these challenges, what could that look like? One of the examples we're doing is social impact investing. We're working with Mars on this, and we made our first gift to Habitat for Humanity to forward an affordable housing build. We have $400 million in assets, as Fred said. Those assets are growing through investments, but what if we could invest for the betterment of the city at the same time. And so we've committed a pilot project of $6 million to do that right now. But my question is, what a great place to get involved. The money comes back, there's still a return, but there's also a social return.
And Claire, you have some experience specifically with pathways around this, right? Pathways for Education.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's a program that we've been involved with for a long time, but I think that Pathways is a program that's sort of a microcosm of what we're talking about today. It was a program that looked at a community and assessed what was happening in that community that ranged from everything from income level issues, immigration issues, and was designed to incorporate all of those issues. And I think the interesting thing about Toronto Foundation is that Vital Signs gives us a context to connect the dots. And the more we connect the dots using the information, the more successful our programs, just as Pathways has been successful at lowering the dropout rate in Regent Park and other communities. I mean, we can attack these bigger issues by connecting the dots more closely and be more strategic about the ways that we invest. And as an individual donor or philanthropist or whatever, I think that we can be more impactful with our donations, which I think we are able to make more intelligently as a result of all of the information that we are
well, I was just going to say, Claire, that one of the things that was, I think is important to stress that people don't always realize, because I've been doing media this week on Vital Signs, that it is just a compilation of all the existing research that's out there. I think what makes it a really powerful gift is that so often the research that's happening on some of these issues is happening in very narrow pillars. And what I love about Vital Signs is it actually brings together all the data. It's amazing to me, the team, because I can't take any credit for it. The team here has been working since April on it. And actually, you can see across the issues. And to Claire's point, start to connect the dots. So when you're looking at child poverty, and then you're looking at the housing crisis, and then you're looking at food banks, it all starts to make sense. And it's where I'm hoping it compels people to say, actually, maybe I want to step into those issues, as opposed to thinking of my philanthropy as sliced organization by organization. And because you can really see a bigger picture at play and where we can start to lower those metrics. Because I know for you and Sam, metrics was really important, right?
Can I?
Yeah, please.
So we had a little lunch last week, and out of that lunch, we had a really interesting conversation, Sarah, with your involvement with the Toronto Library, which was kind of new to me. And I thought it was a really interesting example of how the needs drove.
Right. So speaking of evangelism, I'm an evangelist for the Toronto Public Library. I sit on the board of the Toronto Public Library Foundation, and I was telling Claire a bit about it. And of course, people think of libraries as books, and we love books. Books seem a bit antiquated, but the role that the library plays in 2016 in Toronto is incredibly diverse. One of the things I find most compelling and exciting about it is it plays a role in bridging the digital divide. What does that mean? So there are all kinds of kids who don't have wireless at home because their parents can't afford it. They don't have access to computers. There might be one kind of bad computer in a house of 5 kids. They go to the library to use the computer. And we've actually, we hear from librarians now that kids need the wireless so badly that they'll stay there till 8:30 at night and beg the librarian to keep the library open so they can finish their homework. We've actually launched a new program with some donor support to lend out Wi-Fi hotspots. So kids can actually, instead of borrowing a book, they're borrowing wireless access for the evening. And the library cannot keep up with the demand from the public. And I was going to talk to you a little bit about one of the biggest stories in Toronto and in Canada over the last year is our welcoming of Syrian refugees. Mm-hmm. We've become a beacon as a country to the world of how to deal with this global crisis. Libraries are one of the first places that newcomers come to. And Claire was saying, why not community centers? Well, librarians are incredibly capable of addressing employment needs, getting settled. You need a computer now to do anything.
And how many libraries are there in Toronto?
100.
I was shocked by that.
Yes, there's one everywhere, basically, which is a magnificent thing. And you talked earlier in your presentation about the inner suburbs, and those libraries around the inner suburbs are hubs, or they are community hubs. They are where kids go after school. The library does snack programs for after school kids who need somewhere to go. It is truly one of the treasures of our municipal system.
It's at the core of our social fabric, and I think that this is the point I want to make about issues versus organizations, is that when you can see, like, I'm having lunch with Jennifer Jones, she's here somewhere, the new CEO of the Toronto Public Library Foundation this week, and I want to talk about partnership, because your role we talk a lot in city building philanthropy about big capital projects. The parks are easy to see. You can see how they literally, in our video, bring communities together. I want to go even deeper with that and say, what is the social fabric that we need to put together to create resilient communities? And Toronto Library is a perfect example of one of those keys that is almost invisible to many of us, that's actually holding things together, and probably struggling at times to make that happen.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to build on the Syrian refugee piece, only to say that most people don't know that we hold the Syria Welcome Fund at Toronto Foundation. So one of the other things that I love is just we're backup for organizations that can't put a fund together quickly. We can very quickly. And so this is where our neutral status helps us to bring the right partners to the table to have these compelling conversations.
Claire, when you're talking to your friends about why the Toronto Foundation, what do you tell them?
Well, it's actually I think Toronto Foundation, frankly, is one of those great unknown little diamonds in this city. And, there's community foundations all over the country. Our family is fortunate enough to live here in Toronto, and so naturally we're vested in this community. But people don't know what the Toronto Foundation is. And
there's a good business case as a donor to be involved, isn't there? Not just a philanthropic notion.
Well, it's about getting something for, what am I getting the best benefit for? We made the decision to put money aside to fulfill our philanthropic vision. And, there's a cost to doing that, and how is that money spent most effectively? And so what people don't understand is that, it's an opportunity to control your philanthropy, but to do it with added value. And that's how I look at the foundation, as our added value to.
Well, all our fees go right back into city building. So it's a virtuous loop.
Sharon, do you have any last thoughts before we wrap up? Because I think the people in this room have some important places to be.
Well, I think that if you've heard anything today, you've heard that we're here to step into some of the biggest problems the city's facing. I'm shameless. My name and number on each of your chairs. If anyone wants to continue this conversation, please do. On the back of that card that you've all had on your table, Sarah has kindly given you all free subscriptions to Toronto Life.
Also shameless.
Also shameless and wonderful. But also, I think one of the reasons we wanted Sarah here today was she just has such an interesting sense of the pulse of the city. And so I think it's actually entirely appropriate. So please, we want to continue this conversation. We're going to build learning journeys for donors. If you want to get involved in the issues at play, let us know.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody, for your time. Thank you.
Okay, up and at 'em.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jennifer Sloan, Vice President Public Policy at MasterCard and a proud former president of the Canadian Club. Sharon, on behalf of the club, I wish to thank you and the Foundation for publishing another insightful report on the quality of Toronto life. Each year, Vital Signs provides overwhelming proof of the great attributes of the city many of us call home. It also outlines some sobering facts that require our attention and action. We're grateful to the Toronto Foundation for working diligently to connect donors to community needs so that Toronto will be considered the best place to be for everyone. Sharon, you are off to an amazing start in your new role, and I wish you continued success as you grow and evolve the foundation. The foundation's board was very wise in choosing you to be at the helm. And so we look forward to welcoming you back to our podium for years to come. And to Sarah and Claire, your contribution to the conversation reinforces the strength of leadership in this city. Thank you for emphasizing the importance of being active and engaged citizens. You too are great examples. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Jen. I also want to reinforce our appreciation and thank Sharon, Claire, and Sarah for joining us today and for a very compelling message. This concludes our program today, which will be broadcast on Rogers TV in the days to come. We're grateful to Rogers TV and 680 News for their continuing promotion of Canadian Club events. We'd also like to thank MediaEvents.ca, Canada's online event space, and VVC for live streaming today's event. To learn more about the club, please visit us at canadianclub.org. Thanks for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you at another of our events in the near future. Have a wonderful afternoon.